Senator Marco Rubio is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Intelligence Committees. The Florida Republican is also strongly focused on domestic policy. He is skeptical of the falling jobless rate. As for a possible run for the White House, his family has given him its blessing. Senator Rubio's new book is called American Dreams, Restoring Economic Opportunity for Everyone. He's here for an extended conversation you will see first on CBS This Morning. Senator, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let me turn to terrorism first. How concerned are you that this kind of attack could take place in America, and are we prepared and doing everything we can to make sure that we lessen the possibility?
Well, I'm very concerned, and I've said that for months now, maybe since my time since I arrived in the Senate. The notion that the new wave that we're going to face with terrorism now are these sorts of, there's always the threat of another 9/11 type spectacular attack, but also the threat of individuals or 2 or 3 individuals operating as a cell carrying out these sorts of attacks. We've always known that that has been an aspirational goal of multiple jihadist groups around the world, and now we're actually starting to see it carried out. And from the European context, what's really complicated is the large number of foreign fighters, of people that have left Europe, gone into Syria and Iraq, been trained and fought side by side with ISIS and other groups, and then returned back to Europe. And in the case of these individuals, who've basically been raised in France.
We saw an incredible show of unity yesterday in Paris. I mean, nearly 4 million people, and what Liz Palmer said earlier was the largest march in France's history. Stunning to think about that. And you saw world leaders, from everyone from Netanyahu to Abbas to Cameron, all in the front row, but not a high-ranking U.S. official. Do you think that's troubling?
I thought it was a mistake not to send someone. Look, I understand when the president travels, he brings with him a security and communications package which is intense. And I understand you drop that into the middle of something like this, it could be disruptive. But Eric Holder was in Paris, and maybe John Kerry should have gone, or somebody else, or a plethora of people they could have sent. I think in hindsight, I would hope that they would do it differently.
So what do you think we missed? An opportunity to stand with these other world leaders, and therefore that puts us at a different
Well, you're reporting on it this morning. I mean, and it'll be reported around the world, and certainly people, especially at a time of such great pain, people will take cues for something like that. I mean, we recall after 9/11 what it felt like to have all these nations around the world rally to our side and take up our cause after we suffered so greatly on September 11th of 2001. The French are going through a similar trauma. I thought it would have been important to have someone there. But again, I understand why the president himself didn't go, but perhaps someone else from his administration.
Can we specifically talk about some of the intelligence from the Paris attacks that we covered for several hours here on Friday? The 2 brothers, they had received training in Yemen from Al-Qaeda. The suspect that was killed in the kosher market had ISIS flags in his apartment. It appears his girlfriend has gone back to Syria. What are you hearing in these intelligence briefings? I mean, why didn't European and U.S. officials know where these guys were and have them in their sights?
Well, it sounds like they did. Certainly the French officials were aware of who they were and had monitored them for a while. Now, they would tell you that they have large numbers of people that fit similar categories, which is even more troubling.
I guess the question is,
challenge.
Are you assured then that we're doing a better job here in the United States?
Well, I think we have a lot of very courageous men and women who work every single day to try to identify these threats. No one can promise you that one wouldn't slip through the crack. And part of the reasons why I feel so strongly against these efforts to diminish America's intelligence gathering capabilities is because of the threat that this poses. In fact, it is easier to disrupt a plot of 25 people than it is the plot of 1 or 2 or 3. And to do that, you've got to have all these tools at your disposal. So I think to answer your question, I think we do as good as we can with the programs that we have to diminish those programs, as some are calling for, whether it's gathering intelligence through signals intelligence or monitoring activities on jihadist websites. I think would set back our ability to identify these threats
and prevent
them. Well, not only do we need to increase them, but I think we need to change them, because these groups, every time there's a disclosure, every time the New York Times or you or anyone else reports, as your journalist, so you will, on some sort of disclosure made by a Snowden or someone else, these terrorists adjust what they do. They learn from it, and they say, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to communicate in a different way. We'll use a different carrier or a different method of communication. And so we have to constantly adjust to that, and it's a real challenge. No one should understate what a big, big challenge this is moving forward.
So the White House says it's going to hold this terror summit. What do you expect will come of that?
Well, hopefully an opportunity to educate the American people even further on the nature of this threat and how difficult it is to identify these threats and stop them. Because we are still thinking in light of 9/11, you know, these big spectacular attacks, somebody crashes a plane into a building, and that could very well happen. I mean, that is a threat too. But these sorts of independent actions by 3 or 4 people, in some instances inspired by al-Qaeda or inspired by ISIS, not trained by them, simply inspired by them. And curious is a real threat. Curious to that point, there is a magazine called Inspire, which is a monthly publication in English. The latest edition basically publishes instructions on how to construct a non-metallic explosive. I imagine to get on an airplane.
The editor, Charlie, was on a hit list.
Right.
We know that these things are happening, and some individual maybe has never visited the Middle East but has been radicalized in Europe or in the United States could read these things and take up action. It's a real threat.